Um, can I start just by giving y'all a little bit of an insight into me? Is that okay? Yeah. So, I've got a great desire to learn new things and a terrible follow through. I've got a lot of good ideas, a lot of hobbies I want to pick up, a lot of skills I'd love to have. And when the rubber hits the road, y'all, I fall quick. And so I was thinking about this sermon. I was reminded of when I was in college. I went to a school that had a whole lot of music students. I'm like tone deaf. Y'all don't want to hear me sing gyro. But all my friends played, and my roommates, I had 3 roommates, all of them were music majors playing guitar. And I didn't know a lick. And so I was like, this is my chance. I'm going to learn guitar. And so I sat down with my buddy Jason, who was kindly trying to teach me. And y'all, I was impatient. It takes a while when you know nothing. I wanted shortcuts. I wanted to be able to sound cool really quick, and that wasn't happening. I wanted to grow. I wanted to develop this skill, but I wanted to do it on my own terms. And if you fast forward a year or two, I decided I wanted to get really good at chess. My friend Sonny always beat me in chess, and I was like, I'm going to ask Sonny to teach me. And the same thing happened. Y'all, I wanted to beat him really quick, and it wasn't happening. As much as he taught me, I got impatient. I thought I could figure it out myself, and then I ended up giving up. And then the Lord has worked on me, but if I'm honest, I'm still not as teachable as I'd love to be. And it's because, if I'm honest, I want to grow, but I want it on my terms. I want it on my timeline. I want it my way. And the truth is, when it comes to a lot of areas of our lives, our spiritual lives too, we want growth, but we want it on our terms, in our way, and on our timeline. We're in the middle of a series called Mind the Gap, navigating the space between our beliefs and our experiences. As the wise proverb goes, the longest journey is from the head to the heart. It's a lot of things we know up here that we struggle to believe and live as though they are true. Pastor Boone, a few weeks ago, he did an excellent job talking about the gap we often feel between God's love and our personal experience of that love. Last week we talked about God's presence and believing he is there but struggling to see him. And so today we're going to talk about God's work in our own lives, the gap between believing God is at work in you but struggling to see progress. So we're going to talk about what spiritual growth actually looks like. And here's my sermon in a sentence. If you get nothing else, get this. God grows us organically through subtraction and requiring dependence. God grows us organically through subtraction, requiring dependence. So we're going to be looking today at the book of John. One of Jesus' closest disciples, John, recorded his life, and we're going to be in John chapter 15. And Jesus' disciples are getting some of their very last teachings from Jesus before he goes to the cross. It's the things he wants them to know and hold on to, the things he thinks are incredibly important for them to know as they encounter what's going to be the most world-shattering part of their spiritual experience yet. Because the truth is, Jesus knew that these disciples were people just like me and you, that knew we would get discouraged, we would struggle, we would doubt, and we would, in day-to-day life, sometimes wonder if God would really be at work in them and through them. So we're going to be in John chapter 15, verses 1 through 5. You can follow along on the screen or in the Bibles in front of you. And Jesus is saying these words. He says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. Please pray with me. Lord, as we come to your word, we pray and ask that it would shape us, that you would help us to see you more clearly. Or whether people in this room believe in you or not, I pray that all of us would leave here seeing you as more beautiful and wonderful and worthy of our praise than before. And help us to know, Lord, and have comfort and hope in how you are at work in our lives, even when we struggle to see it. Amen. So first thing we're going to see, we'll look at John 15, verse 1, and we'll see that spiritual growth is organic, not formulaic. Spiritual growth is organic, not formulaic. When talking about what to expect, Jesus paints a picture for them. He says, I am the vine. My Father is the vine dresser. He points them to the world around them, something they would have seen often, a grapevine and branches. And grapes were foundational to the world and economy of the ancient Near East. So it's something that his disciples would have seen again and again and been familiar with how they worked. And Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. I am the source, I am the center. And the Father is the vine dresser. He is at work tending, cultivating, and directing the growth. And so when Jesus begins to talk about what spiritual growth looks like, he paints a picture and gives them an illustration, not a step-by-step formula. He doesn't give them a book, but he paints them a picture. And he says, hey, look at nature. Look at how a grapevine grows. Look at and know the progress, the seasons that it goes through. How there's times where in spring it buds quickly, and there's also times where growth is slow and under the surface in ways that you can't see. Because you see, sometimes in areas of our life, we want microwave growth. Yeah, when I found out microwave rice was a thing, it was beautiful. You can get the goodness of rice in a third of the time. The one I bought the other day was 10 minutes it takes. And if I put it on the stove, it's a lot more than that. And the truth is, we want so many things in our life to be microwavable. We want things to move quick. We expect results quickly. And yet the reality is how God made us, how God made me, how God made you, is that is not the case. Growth is slow. Growth is seasonal. Vines have winters. And he does it, Jesus paints this picture to give them a realistic understanding, that it's not a linear line, but a confusing back and forth process. It involves growth, but not always in the ways we expect. I made this little chart to illustrate some of our points of what we perceive growth should look like. A nice, straight, linear line. And in reality, if you want to know what walking with Jesus looks like, it's a lot more true to this one. You might take some loop-de-loops. You'll take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. You'll feel like, man, I've been praying for the Lord to grow me in patience, and you see it, and you're being more and more patient, and then something happens, and you lose your mind, and you're like, man, am I back at square one? Growth is organic, it's slow, it takes time, but it's this idea of what theologians call progressive sanctification. We're being made more like Jesus, but it is progressive, it is slow, and we have to recognize and respect the process. And y'all, this is hard for me. I was looking at this and I forgot I even wrote it, but I wrote in my journal 4 months ago. I was trying to put some pen to paper. And literally I wrote this. I said, I always thought growth was linear, not in my head, but my heart. But sometimes to move forward, we have to take a step back. And I was like, dang, Lord, this is something I'm always working on, is believing the words that I speak. And so he starts by reminding them of painting them this picture that spiritual growth is like that of the world around us. It's organic, it's slow, it moves in a certain direction, but it takes time, and it's not on our timeline. And it starts by being connected to him. He is the vine. We can't expect growth apart from him. And then he says this other thing that's challenging but beautiful. My Father is the vine dresser. And that means God is the one in charge of our growth, not us. We do our thing. It doesn't mean we don't put forth effort, but we have a lot less control than we think we do. The vine dresser is the one directing. We can't force God into a box of how he will work, but he's the one orchestrating things behind the scenes. And this can either be incredibly scary or incredibly comforting, all depending on how we view the vine dresser. I remember talking to my counselor in a season where I was frustrated with my spiritual progress. I was struggling with the growth I wasn't seeing. The way I struggled with some of the same things I had for years, wondering if they would change, and talking about how do I speed this up. And he said these words to me. He said, Nathan, I think you are too efficient for your own sanctification. Nathan, I think you are too efficient for your own sanctification. Sanctification is that theological word we use for spiritual growth, for becoming more like Jesus, growing in our love for him and resisting sin. And he was saying, I wanted my growth in Jesus to look a certain way and be on a certain timeline. And maybe in doing that, I was actually hindering the work God was doing. And maybe I needed to slow down. Notice what was happening inside of myself. Ask God for eyes to see how he is at work rather than trying to microwave the work he was doing in my life. So what's this mean for us practically? I just invite you to consider if we are a branch and Jesus is the vine, what season are you in? Vines have season. Are you in a season in your spiritual life where you have a desire for growth? You're wanting to learn, you're wanting to grow, you're wanting to be connected. It's a joy to get up and come to church. Lean in. Recognize that, name that, ask for people to encourage it. But also don't expect perpetual spring. Some of you may be in winter. Things may feel dry and barren. It might be hard. And you're like, is God even doing anything? And know that winter is not unexpected. God is still at work under the soil, and the roots are going deeper so that you're prepared for what's to come. And practically, what does it look like for us to do this in our own lives and for others? I found it helpful to think of this idea of growth happens with grace, space, and time. Grace, space, and time. We need the good news of God's grace. We need the grace of those around us, but we also need space and time for growth to happen. As Pastor Boone always told me, time takes time. There's no speeding it up. And it's helpful when we think about growth, and it's really helpful when we think about our kids, our friends, our loved ones that we want to see change, and we sometimes put them on our timeline. Are we able to provide grace and space and time for them? And you may say, okay, I get growth isn't a formula with a specific step-by-step rule, but it has to look like something. There's something I can expect or know or predict. And the answer is yes, but it's not what you want. Because growth is often through subtraction before addition. If we look back in the text at verse 2, we're told, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear fruit. And so if we focus on that first part, there's a lot of different ideas of what that might mean. Every branch in me that's in Jesus that does not bear fruit, he takes away. There's different interpretations. If you have questions and want to dive into that, I'd be happy to talk more. But Jesus, I believe, is not talking about people that fall away from the faith. but there are those that seem connected to the vine, to the church, that aren't actually connected to Jesus. And it's an invitation for us to reflect. Hey, I'm in and around church things. I'm in and around Christians, but am I actually connected to the vine? Do I know Jesus? Am I walking with him? It's an invitation to reflection. And I believe it's also meant to be an encouragement to us in a world where we can sometimes see people use Jesus for their own ends. To know what Jesus says elsewhere, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will be saved. Just because somebody carries the name of Christ does not mean they actually reflect him or know him. That's not our job to judge and tell them where they're at, but it's our job to know the Lord is the one who's the ultimate judge of that. But I want to focus on that second part. Every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. I'm not a gardener. Some of y'all in here have a lot more wisdom than me. So I looked up pruning in Webster's dictionary. And it said to cut off or cut back parts for better shape or more fruitful growth. To cut. That's not exactly a pleasant picture when we think about growth. But it's the cutting back of a branch so that it may grow. It's addition through subtraction. And so I want to highlight a few things. One, it says every branch. It doesn't say most branches, some branches. Branches that made bad choices. Branches that, whatever you want to put in there. It says every branch. You cannot escape pruning or suffering or difficulty in the Christian life. If you expect that, you will be disappointed. Every branch gets pruned, and in fact, growth cannot happen without it. The second thing, pruning is painful. Sometimes the work God is doing in our life is not pleasant or easy. Often growth can happen through suffering, through trials, through sickness, through loss that feel painful, that even make us doubt God's presence. And yet he's using those to actually make himself clearer in our hearts and our lives. When your marriage gets turned upside down, when there's an unexpected diagnosis, when you experience a job loss, it may actually be a season where God is growing you in an incredible way. Cutting back things that you relied on for life that were not the true life giver. So that you are forced to rely on Jesus in a whole new way. There's a great preacher from London, Charles Spurgeon, who experienced tremendously severe bouts of depression and sickness. And he said this, I am sure that I have derived more real benefit, permanent strength, growth and grace in every precious thing from the furnace of affliction than I have ever derived from prosperity. Saying the ways that I look back on my life and see where I grew, where I got to actually know Jesus more deeply, wasn't when things were good, but was actually when things were incredibly hard. And that's not always good news for us. It doesn't always feel like what we want to hear. But it's important for us to know that if we're in the midst of that, God is at work in that season. And the last thing, pruning, it's painful. It happens to every branch. And pruning involves removal. It involves cutting back from a branch and removing that which is sickly, dead, or unhealthy. And that means spiritual growth will sometimes involve removal. This means that deconstruction can actually be an important part of our spiritual journey. That even people, even those that we love, that we trusted, whether that's pastors or family members, they might have taught us things that were well-intentioned but are actually out of step with Scripture. And part of growth might mean reassessing those, cutting some of those back so that you're able to build and grow in a healthier direction. So deconstruction doesn't have to be an enemy, but it's a valuable tool with the aims of reconstructing, not with staying deconstructed. And I've got a picture I want to show y'all because it was both encouraging and painful to me. This is a picture of a pruned vine. I looked at that and I was like, that is not a good looking vine. That doesn't look like grapes I want to eat. That's not a picture that I like to see, but that is what a vine looks like when it has been pruned and it is actually ready for growth. There is a whole lot of excess. There's a whole lot of things that have been cut back so that growth can be directed towards the most fruitful ends. And so sometimes you might feel like your life, everything is being laid bare. Everything is being cut off. You're like, I don't know what I have left after this season. I don't know where to turn or where to go. And I want you to know that that is what a pruned vine looks like that is ready for growth. And so you might feel like you've got nothing. And Jesus is right there saying, if you are connected to the vine, be prepared for some growth. Be prepared for me to work in your life in some tangible ways. So what's this mean? If you're in the midst of pruning, know that God has not abandoned you. It's a sign of his work rather than the opposite. 2, if you pray the bold prayer to get closer to God, know what you're in for. It's not always going to be answered in the way you'd like. You're not going to pray to get to know Jesus better and wake up with the warm fuzzies the next morning, ready to tackle, ready to love your deepest, darkest enemy. It's going to be hard, but it's good. And also know that sometimes a step forward spiritually may at first look like a step back. Instead of feeling the need to add to everything, and instead of feeling the need to do more in the midst of an already crammed life and schedule, what if you paused and received from God, knowing he loves you and cares for you right where you are? And you may say, okay, but what about when everything feels too hard, I'm overwhelmed, and I feel stuck where I've always been? Know this, growth is about dependence, not self-reliance. Growth is about dependence, not self-reliance. Verse 4 says, abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. He continues, I am the vine, you are the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Jesus is hitting this point home again and again and again. Stay connected to the vine. And we don't use the word abide often. That doesn't show up in my everyday language. But what it means is remain, stay connected to, stay with. Don't lose sight of Jesus. If we want to grow, we have to stay connected to the source. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Jesus isn't saying that it's impossible for you to live, but he's saying if you want to grow spiritually, it's not going to happen through relying on yourself. He is the life-giving vine. There's this idea that theologians talk about called union with Christ, that actually through faith we are united to Jesus. Day in and day out, in how we live our life, in where we go. There's no separating that, but Jesus is actually with us. We are connected to him. And many people I know these days are spiritual but not religious. They want connection with something bigger than themselves. They want connection with the spiritual world. Maybe that's you. And I want to tell you the beautiful thing about Christianity is that we, through faith, are connected to Jesus. We are connected to the divine. And that is not some far-off end goal we get at if we jump through all the hoops. It is yours and mine now through faith. We're connected to Jesus, and spiritual growth means living into that connection, living into that dependence, leaning on him day in and day out, saying, Lord, I need you. I can't do this on my own. I can't raise my kids the way I want to on my own. I can't love my coworkers that I struggle with on my own. Instead of feeling the temptation to take everything on ourselves, we lean on him. One of my old mentors used to always say that the gospel, the Christian faith, is not moving from dependence to independence, but independence to dependence. We live in a world that prioritizes independence. And many of you worked hard to get where you are. You've been driven, you've been responsible, and that is a good and beautiful thing. I don't want to dismiss that, but when it comes to your spiritual growth, if you're trying to need God less and less, you're going to be disappointed on your growth. Growth in faith actually happens through needing Jesus more and more, turning to him again and again, not thinking that you can walk into this situation on your own strength because you've been doing it for a while, but saying, Lord, I need you in this. I need you to show up. Turning to him, trusting him, asking him to work in and through us. So I just encourage you this week. I don't know what it looks like. Maybe it looks like taking a quiet minute every day. Maybe it looks like taking a quiet 5 minutes each morning. But slow down and be with Jesus. Don't just learn about him, but be with him. Quit trying to get so much done, but put your phone to the side, sit and say, Lord, will you just meet me in this place? And the second thing I'd encourage you to do is practice dependence. What does that mean? I don't mean see how low you can get with your fuel light on and pray to the Lord that he'll get you to Costco in time. I'm not saying that. I don't think that's what practical dependence looks like. I'm saying put yourselves in situations where you need to rely on God, where you're trying to love somebody that's difficult and you're saying, Lord, I want you to be present with me in this. Where you pray a prayer that maybe you're a little bit scared to pray. Where you ask a question or maybe even challenge somebody in your life on something that you're afraid to bring up because you're a people pleaser. I don't know what it looks like for you, but practice a place where you're a little uncomfortable and saying, Lord, I need you here and now. So as I close, I'll just say this. So spiritual growth, it's organic, not formulaic. It involves subtraction before addition. It involves moving towards dependence rather than self-reliance. And that last thing especially, talking about dependence, you may say, isn't that just letting us off the hook? Isn't that just saying, okay, I just don't need to do anything. It's all on God, and so I just get to coast. And that may feel natural to us, especially in different spheres of life, but what it reveals, I think, because I felt that within my own heart, is that we often see growth as needing to be fueled by fear or shame rather than by love. That if we feel on the hook for something, that's how we'll actually grow, rather than if we're motivated by the love that Jesus has shown us and to respond to that. And so I want you to know that you aren't on a hook. God put himself on the hook. In Jesus. He took the pain, he took the shame, he took the guilt, he took the inadequacy, he took the shortcomings so that they wouldn't define us. So that we then, in response to the love he's shown us, can grow, can depend on him, can see him at work in our lives. Not out of fear or shame for what he's going to do if we don't measure up enough. And I'll close. There's a pastor I really like, Kanishka Raphael. So he was elected as the bishop of Sydney within the Anglican Church. He was the first non-European elected to the office, non-European origin. And he said this when he was elected to this role as a leader of churches all throughout Australia. He said, "You have elected a weak servant. And you too are but weak servants." He's speaking to ministry leaders, to pastors, to those in churches. "But we have a mighty Savior, full of grace, sovereign, sufficient, supreme. And if I can make a pledge, it is this: to stand at the foot of the cross, weak, dependent, and forgiven. And from there to seek to serve as he enables." And that's what we're invited to do in the same way, to sit at the foot of the cross, weak, dependent, and forgiven. But from there to receive from Jesus as the vine, the strength that enables us to serve and love and live in light of what he has done.